Good afternoon, colleagues, and a very warm welcome. We'll just check we've got everybody safely admitted and then we'll get going. One of the team could let me know that we've got the full lobby into the meeting.
Yep, that's everyone admitted.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, and a very warm welcome to this, the first of our webinar series on preventing violence prevention in education and putting what works into action. My name's Alison Wilson. I'm a regional director here at the Department for Education, and I'm delighted to be introducing this series this afternoon and having so many of you join us. We are recording this session, so please do be aware of that. And also, just to say as well, there is a live Q&A which you can access, so please do input any questions that you have along the way into that live Q&A, and we will look at those and we'll bring those forward for a discussion at the end of the session. So as things occur to you, please pop them into the Q&A. So a really warm welcome, and I hope we'll have a really great hour together this afternoon going through what is a hugely important topic. There's such an important agenda here for us all to work together on around tackling serious violence in education. And what I think today is all about is trying to use evidence-informed approaches. So not just trying to do things, but trying to do things that we know have a good evidence base that they will work. So this is the first in a series on leading violence prevention in education. There'll be other seminars today, so if you enjoy what you hear today, if you learn things from what you hear today, please do stay tuned and join us for some of the other sessions in this series. And also, if you think this has been good today, please do promote it to some of your other colleagues and do share the availability of this to others in your networks too. I think schools have an incredibly powerful and unique role in trying to help us to prevent violence. Schools are not just places of education. That's one of their fundamental purpose and aims, of course it is, but they are also hubs of safeguarding, and that by having good connections, monitoring children's well-being, intervening early, schools can significantly reduce the likelihood of children in our communities becoming involved in serious violence. And I just want to reflect for a second on why this really matters. Now, my day job, I'm the regional director for the Yorkshire and Humber, and you'll know, colleagues, in a city in my region, Sheffield, we've had a very tragic recent case, which has really shook the heart and the emotions of the whole city, where violence has occurred in one of our schools. And so this stuff can, shatter lives, and it affects our teacher colleagues, it affects children, affects families, it affects communities, and it affects whole cities when things like this do happen. And so we really do realise this is a really live and burning issue. And I'm sure because you're here today, you share that sense of why this matters, and you want to be doing something about it, and you want to be hearing some ideas and some evidence about what we can do to help tackle some of this challenge. We recognise that it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue for schools. We have sort of data and evidence that more than half of schools in the country are reporting that they're actively dealing with knife crime and safeguarding issues. And actually 18% of primary schools too. That's when I read that, I was just kind of blown away by that fact too. And as I say, you play a critical role in prevention strategies, and you're very much part of a team with us in trying to tackle some of that. I think sort of the aim of today really is to look at evidence-informed practice. As I said earlier, we could do lots of stuff, and we could try lots of things, but actually having really good bets, safe bets that we can try, things that other people have tested and have evidence around, is going to be the best things that we can do at this time. So you're going to hear a lot about evidence-based approaches and a practical application of some of those in today. So we're going to have some speakers join us this afternoon, and they're going to talk us through the EPIC self-assessment tool. And then you're going to sort of hear some of that practically applied in one of our academies, ARC, Globe, and you're going to be able to hear from colleagues about that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, and we'll get into the conversation today. So thank you very much. And if we could just move the slide on, please.
So yeah, it's great to be joined with you all for this afternoon's webinar. My name's Dennis Sims. I'm former school leader, now Assistant Director of Change in Education at the Youth Endowment Fund. I'm also joined by my colleagues Joe and Ben, who you'll hear from a bit later on in the presentation. So you may not have heard of the YAF, or you may already be familiar with us. Just to give us a bit of context, we are the What Works Centre that are funded to specifically focus on children's involvement in violence. We do this by working across 7 of the essential sectors that have a role to play in preventing children's involvement in violence. And of course, education is a crucial one, with educators being able to spot the signs, intervene, and provide young people with the support that they need. We specifically focus on finding what works, so learning about the evidence and producing guidance that can provide the sector and policymakers with understanding of how to make a difference. And we're specifically focused on this area, and we're really grateful to be with you this afternoon to be able to talk to you all about what we've learned and what we're able to share with the sector. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague who's going to talk to you a bit around kind of why violence is important and some of the data around that.
Thank you, Dennis. So every year we survey around 10,000 13 to 17-year-olds across England and Wales. And from that, we know that 20% of teenage children report being victims of violence. And actually 61% of incidents experienced by those children led to a physical injury. In 2024, of the teenage children who were victims of violence, 65% of those experienced it multiple times within the year, with nearly a third, so that's 5% of all teenage children, reporting that it occurred more than 5 times. And worryingly, from our survey with those young people, we found that half of teenage children in romantic relationships have experienced violent or controlling behaviours, and that actually includes a third experiencing physical or sexual violence. So considering the data that we have to understand the impact of violence on children's lives, it's not surprising then that violence also impacts on their educational experiences. And just to pull some data from that same survey, in 2024, 10% of children were skipping school due to fears of violence, and that increased to 26% of children who had been victims of violence. We know that there's considerable attention on attendance at the moment across the sector, and it's important that leaders recognise that violence could be a contributing factor to absence. So I'd really encourage you to reflect on whether violence prevention has been included in the conversations that you're having about improving attendance at the moment. 22% of those teenage children reported that the fear of violence had impacted on their mental health, their appetite and their sleep, and had also made it difficult to concentrate and focus in school. And the graph here is taken from a teacher tap survey, and it's answered by just over 7,000 education professionals. And in just one term last academic year, 70% of respondents said a child had committed a physical assault on another child, and 42% had said yes to a child committing physical assault against a staff member. And the data that we present does present a really worrying picture. And it might be that we have people on the call today who have been impacted by an incident in their setting. And therefore, the challenge that we see across the sector is that leaders are not always confident in dealing with these incidents. but they're also not confident in being able to identify and implement evidence-informed approaches that can prevent these incidents from happening. And we also need to acknowledge the gap in professional development and training around this area. So 82% of teachers and 72% of designated safeguarding leads reported receiving no training on serious violence in the past 2 years. So at YEF, we're really passionate about addressing that knowledge gap in the system and really equipping leaders with the tools needed to firstly understand the evidence and secondly implement evidence-informed approaches effectively. The Ofsted inspection framework provides an impetus for us to continue developing awareness in the system and supporting leaders to prevent children's involvement in violence. And there's this new addition to the inspection framework that every school and FE setting will be inspected on whether they protect children from violence and can use an evidence-based approach to do so. And it's great for us at YEF that there's now this policy lever in the system to bring leaders' attention to violence prevention, but we know that there's more work to do to develop that confidence and capacity across the sector to do this well. Within the safeguarding chapter of that framework, there's now a section exploring child-on-child violence, and inspectors will be looking to see whether leaders and staff are aware of the signs that pupils may be at risk of becoming involved in violence. And this brings us to the importance of effective safeguarding, which is absolutely foundational to the recommendations that we're going to be exploring throughout this webinar series. We know that education settings are uniquely positioned to prevent children's involvement in violence because they play such a critical role in safeguarding children. So being able to identify and respond to concerns early, undertaking that work with external agencies to protect children from harm and promoting children's welfare is absolutely integral. And I'm really excited to be able to hand over to Matt Jones and Dan Rogers from Art Globe Academy, who will share an overview of safeguarding in practice within their context.
Thank you very much, Jo. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity for us to share some of the work that we do and our approach to preventing violence. I'm Matt Jones, Executive Principal, Art Globe Academy. We are based in South London, in Southwark, in Elephant and Castle more specifically. And just before I get started, this is our approach. Our approach is based on the evidence of what we've seen work both in London and beyond. But there are obviously context and nuance that needs to be applied for each individual setting. From the outset, I will just give you an insight into our context at South London, Elephant and Castle, and then Dan, the Vice Principal at Art Globe Academy, will provide a bit more detail on the summary that I will provide in terms of the strategic approach that we take. So firstly, here's a little brief summary of the school. You can see there high ethnic minority groups, EAL, but the data set there around vulnerable children, CIN and CP 4 times the national rate, and we've got over 69% of students who are pupil premium. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight into the community that we serve. And here I'll just put on the slide, this was provided by the local police, which we get updates every 2 weeks around theft and robberies in our area. And just to say, that's the London Borough of Southwark outline there, and that we are right bang in the middle of those hotspots you can see for theft and robberies. So not only contextually in school, but the risks are also associated very much in our local community. And as a consequence of that, the local authority, Southwark, was selected as part of the Safe Schools Task Force, which was a programme introduced for 10 boroughs across the country, or 10 local authorities across the country, to try and reduce violence, and youth violence in particular. And this indicates the level of challenge and risk that our community was facing around this. The great thing about this initiative is it was a vehicle that supported and encouraged local collaboration in a coherent way to meet the challenges, not only working with other school partners, but with other services in the local community. So that's the context. I'll just give you a bit of an overview of our strategy before I hand over to Dan. So a large part of our strategy is around high quality personal development program, whereby students are taught around not just the generic things around personal development, such as social media, but also local contextual issues that they need to be aware of. And that program is flexible as we go through the academic year. We have a well-resourced and robust attendance strategy. If there's children in school, they're safe. That's a big part of our work that Dan does. We have additional pastoral leadership, just because of the level of complexity that I shared earlier with our community and our children. To do that work well, we need to make sure we've got the workforce to meet their needs. We've got a comprehensive mental health program. Dan can talk more about that as we go through, and an extensive extracurricular enrichment opportunities that are provided for all students for free. And Dan, again, will talk through in a bit more detail. All of this work in terms of the strategy is underpinned, though, by really strong adult-children relationships and the explicit teaching our academy culture, which enables us to connect with the young people and the people to feel connected to our school. Dan, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Matt. It leads nicely into the first point that I'll make today when I talk about the high quality personal development programme that we have at Globe. And really what sits as the centrepiece of our academy is our culture pyramid, which kind of permeates all facets of school life, whether it's line management between adults, conversations between teachers and students, or teachers, students and parents. It really does form a kind of key part of how we operate as a community and how we operate as a school. And what's really pleasing is that students also use this language when they hold each other to account or when they have conversations with adults too. And we think that having a really strong set of values that are shared and understood by everybody in the school community really gives us a strong platform to start from and to continue our work from. And this is kind of interwoven into a strategically planned personal development overview, which is a big document that we have, which encompasses all elements of our bespoke personal development programme here at Art Globe Academy. This does include our PSHE curriculum, which is mapped out from reception all the way up to year 13, and is also congruent with all of the statutory elements of the PSHE curriculum, and we structure that and teach that on a spiral basis so the content is revisited and is also age appropriate. This includes discussing being witness to or victims of violence or crimes, experiencing violence or abusive relationships, and also how to report such incidents and the law surrounding these issues too. And as I said already, these are adapted each year so that they are taught at an age appropriate level. This also, we also consider in our PSHE curriculum local and regional issues so that it really is rooted contextually into our context and into our community. A big part of this also starts in our year 6 to year 7 transition programme, where students join us in the summer holidays between year 6 and year 7 and undergo an induction into life at secondary school. But a significant part of this actually is an induction into the culture pyramid and the culture of our academy and our school. In addition to that, all of students in year 7 study values and character when they join at the start of year 7, and that puts the culture pyramid at the front and centre of what they're studying, how we operate, because it really is part of the fabric of the school. Moving outside of PSHE, our strategic personal development offer also includes in our annual overview plan an assembly plan, so we can map out as we see trends throughout the academic year, we can reflect on and adapt that in the following year. But also we have something called scenario-based learning, which we introduced 2 years ago, and they're delivered during learning family time or tutor time. And we present scenarios of things that could happen in school or outside of school, and students discuss different people's responses and approaches. And so we are explicitly teaching what is right and what is wrong. What's really key about the scenario-based learning program is that it allows us to address contextual safeguarding. So if something does happen in the local community or something happens in school, we can address that with students. It's in a depersonalized way with a form tutor who is an adult that they trust. It also has allowed us in the past to include scenarios that discuss violence or inappropriate behaviours or inappropriate sexualised behaviours, and importantly, the response of other students when they may witness or see those incidents taking place. It is also prudent to mention that we have a zero tolerance policy towards sexualised and violent behaviour, whether that's peer-to-peer or student towards adult, and we make that very explicit to students when we set out our expectations. I think it's also important to mention, as part of that, we do sanction and have a zero tolerance policy to play fighting, because again, it's teaching students in the professional sense linked to our culture pyramid what behaviours are acceptable in professional and which behaviours are not. And we always work with families and parents with all such instances through our restorative approach. The next thing I'm going to talk about is attendance. We all know, everyone in this meeting today knows that being in school is the safest place and the best place for all young people. At Art Globe Academy, we have strong strategic leadership of attendance, which is overseen by me as Vice Principal, an assistant principal, and our attendance officer alongside the pastoral team. We've internally created an attendance tracker, which is used to analyse and plan an action plan with all levels of staff across the academy. And this includes a focus on our most vulnerable students, which I'll talk about in more detail later. We do therefore have robust tracking systems that are checked multiple times a day, in addition to weekly, half-termly and termly checks. And that allows us really to have early interventions with students and also with parents. And this really is about engaging all stakeholders with regards to attendance, not just the student, but the parents and the families as well. When I talk about students, we also have an explicit attendance curriculum that is taught as part of the PSHE curriculum, just to highlight to students the importance of coming to school and also to pick out some of the concerns that students may have around coming to school, and also addressing attendance to school and mental health explicitly with the students. We work very closely with Southwark EIT for escalations related to poor attendance, but we always involve parents at the earliest stages when there is a drop in attendance so that we can identify barriers to poor attendance and work collaboratively to try and find a solution. This may involve home visits and it may involve temporary reasonable adjustments, but everything is done on a case-by-case basis to best support the child that's in question. What's significant here for us as a school is that we ensure that we robustly hold stakeholders to account where escalation is needed, and we ensure that the local authority or social care, if they are the lead professional, is also held to account for their responsibilities as are outlined in the Working Together to Improve School Attendance document. And that forms part of our robust response to improving school attendance. I'll also speak later in more detail about some of the other opportunities that we have to offer students to help improve their engagement in school. And as a result, as you can see on the board, we have on your screen, sorry, we have seen a year-on-year improvement in attendance over the past 4 years. Our attendance figures currently are above national, but importantly and significantly, the attendance of our disadvantaged students is significantly higher than that of the national average. So our robust response and persistence with attendance means last year we were also the most improved school in Southwark. And students really do see the school as a place where they belong and a place that they feel part of the community. Moving on, I'm going to talk now about our additional pastoral leadership, and some of these things I think are quite unique to Globe and how Globe works. So we operate a small school structure where we split the secondary school into 4 small schools, and essentially what that translates into is Key Stage 3 is split in half. Okay, so year 7, 8 and 9 is split in half into 2 separate schools on the same site. This means that we actually have 1 more head of year than you would have in an average school. We have additional leadership in Key Stage 5, as you would in an average school. And we also have an additional senior leader, an assistant principal with pastoral responsibility. What this does is it improves the teacher to student ratio. It ensures that swift and early intervention and noticing those initial signs that we see in students is much more common, both inside and outside of school. What is significant to some of the points made in the introduction to this meeting is that all of our pastoral leaders have had positive handling training, and all of our pastoral leaders are level 3 safeguarding trained. This further supports our ability for early identification and to ensure that effective support is put into place. What you'll see on the board in terms of those statistics is our pastoral team does deal with behaviour, and you'll see that over the last 3 years, our number of fixed term suspensions has decreased year on year, and then our number of permanent exclusions is low and is lower than national average. Now, for transparency, we did a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, have a spate of suspensions and some permanent exclusions, and these were related to serious incidents that did happen. But since then, we have put a more deliberate and more intensive work into place to provide additional support. educate children, but also ensure that on each occasion and each situation, there's an immediate response. But in addition to that immediate response, what's really important for us is ensuring there's a long-term, multifaceted and multi-pronged approach to move forward, where we engage relevant stakeholders in the local community and the local authority to ensure that sufficient support is provided not only for the school, but also for the young person and their family, so the community as a whole feels supported. And so the last point on that slide, we have also created, after many iterations, a vulnerable student tracker, where we have put together different indices of vulnerability, and students come up with a vulnerability, or we call it a vulnerability score. What that does, in having all of that in one place and in one document, allows us to identify who are our students who are most at risk. And then alongside that, we have all of our pastoral and inclusion-based interventions where we record when they start and when they stop. So we can track strategically with the senior leadership team, with the pastoral team, who are our most vulnerable children, what interventions have they had or are they having, and has that had an impact, has that had an effect? And that's allowed us to be really specific and really precise around what interventions we're putting in for what children and how that is supporting them during that time here at Globe. I'm also going to, that leads nicely actually onto our mental health support. So I think it's important to mention that our attendance assistant principal who leads on attendance as our senior leader, as our senior lead, is also a senior mental health lead at the school, and he does attend sessions in the local authority that are run by the Southwark team around EBSA, so emotionally based school avoidance, and other support and supporting mechanisms that the local authority can use to support families. A vice principal at our school is also the DSL and the SENCO, and that allows for there to be a really triangulated response to data and incidents that happen kind of on the day and over time, as we're able to marry that data together and ensure that we put forward the best plan to support the family and the young person. You'll see on the board a number of external partners that we do work with. I think it's important to mention that we don't just say yes to everything. We are very particular about organisations that we do work with where we respond directly to need in the school. So you'll see on the board Future Men, that was responding specifically to an area for development that we identified in school. And similarly, this year, we're now working with Be Her Lead because we felt that that was an area that we did also need to focus on to support some of our young female students at school as well. And the last thing for me to mention today is the significant level of extracurricular and enrichment opportunities that are available at our school for our students. And firstly, you can see on the board there that clubs run at school from 7:30 in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening. That means the school is always open for students. And as you've seen from our attendance figures, the school is a place that students want to be and somewhere that they do buy into. We provide high quality extracurricular activities from a range of different interests, so there really is something for everybody. And we ensure that all opportunities are free of charge to all students. For us, that's of particular importance because of the makeup of our school and the area that we find ourselves in. So any trip or any enrichment activity, whether it's Duke of Edinburgh, whether it's going to Oxford University, whether it's going to Brighton for the day, all of those are paid for by the school. In addition to the clubs and trips that we have 3 enrichment days in each academic year. One of them focuses solely on culture, where the children experience different cultures, and we teach tolerance, fundamental British values through that day, and that's become a real set piece in our school, where students openly celebrate each other too. We also have an enrichment day which focuses on hobbies and interests. So we take students out of their comfort zones, where they can pursue things that wouldn't necessarily always be available to them. For example, taking students from Elephant and Castle to South London to go horse riding, to cooking classes, and really getting them out of their comfort zone so they can find something that interests them. I also need to mention the significance of community engagement in our community and in our setting. We have an annual summer fair that takes place in school on a Saturday in the summer. Last year, we had over 2,000 people come to that community event, and that is students, that is families, that is local residents that come into the school. And it really raises the profile of the school in the community. So it isn't a school with closed gates. It's a school that is an integral part of the community that students feel is their safe place and the place where they belong. And that's really, really key. And you'll see on the slide there just kind of the outcome of some of the investments that the school has made. So we are a school in Zone 1. We don't have a massive field, but the students petitioned for a long jump pit, and we put a long jump pit in the school playground. As a result, our school regularly features in the top of the league in national measures. So in the national athletics, we currently have 2 students in year 11 who are UK record holders, and you'll see there also a member of our school who is representing England in the basketball last year. So when we do focus on these things and emphasize the importance of those things to students, it really can have a difference on their engagement in school life, and their next steps too. And all of these things I'll summarize now because I can see the time, but all of these things I've mentioned today culminate really in a strong sense of belonging, in a strong sense of community. That is reflected in the outcomes of our students, that are regularly kind of above national. We have 70% 4+ last year, with a cohort of 68% of students being disadvantaged. And at Key Stage 5, our value added was 0.42 last year. Our attendance figures are obviously on the up year on year. And all of that really is a result of the work that the team do in the school to support students, engage students and their families through their journey with us at Globe.
Just so fantastic to hear about all of that great work, and yeah, moving from thinking about the statistics at a national level to the specifics at a contextual level, and the impact that that can have on young people. Moving on into the guidance that the YAF shares, there are 2 main documents that I want to draw your attention to. The first of which is the Education Practice Guidance, and we're going to be talking about this just briefly in this session. And then throughout the rest of the webinar series, we're really going to be unpacking each of the recommendations from within that guidance. But we also recognise that although there's an important role for school leaders to play, there are some limits within the system, and there are some barriers and challenges, which means that we need to work on the system at large and think about what are the policy changes that would better support our schools to support children and ensure that they are prevented from involvement in violence. So our education systems guidance is where we package and put together all of our recommendations around system reform as well. I did mention that education practice guidance. It's all built on that foundation of great safeguarding. And, you know, we're, as school leaders, we're talked to about safeguarding all the time, and we're talking to our school staffs about safeguarding all the time. But what we really want to get to is a point in which we're putting in the right preventative mechanisms so that we're having fewer, violent incidents occurring, and being able to provide the right support in response to any incidents that do occur or any risks that are identified. We've identified 5 recommendations, and I'm going to touch on them very, very briefly. They're all evidence-informed recommendations, and in the future webinars, I'm going to be unpacking them with colleagues from across the Youth Endowment Fund to help you understand what the evidence says, and then how to marry that with your own context and your knowledge of your schools and your pupils. So really briefly, there are 5 recommendations. The first one is to keep children and young people in education. And as we've heard, that importance of attendance strategies, there's behaviour management strategies, and also that focus on suspensions and exclusions, that all forms part of keeping children in education. And we know from the data that being in school is a protective factor. So it protects children from involvement in violence and limits risks that are taking place outside of the school. We also know that it's great to have trusted adults, but particularly vulnerable children may find it more difficult to build trusted adult relationships with whether it's teachers or any member of staff across the school. And therefore, there are some specific interventions that we recommend to support those trusted adult relationships. We also know that developing children's social and emotional skills is really, really important. So when we survey children, we ask them about whether they've been a victim or perpetrator of violence in the preceding 12 months. Of those who shared with us that they had committed an act of violence, a vast majority of them said that it's because they were provoked. And therefore, equipping young people with the skills, the awareness, the ability to manage their emotions and make responsible decisions is really, really important to prevent violence. Recommendation 4 is around the targeting of the places and times where violence occurs. We know what the national data looks like. Violence peaks Monday to Friday, usually after school. But there are some specific things that we can do at a school level to understand what's actually happening within our school, within our building, across our site, and in our surrounding community. And lastly, which we'll unpack in a future webinar, there's some things that we know just don't work and some things that we're just not sure about yet. And we'll be sharing more about those soon. I'm going to hand over to my colleague who's going to talk to you all about a great tool that we really want to encourage you to make the most of, as it is built off of these 5 recommendations and is a fantastic starting point for your journey in terms of violence prevention.
Thanks, Dennis. So I think you've shared the strength of the guidance that we've published, but we have found that there is a bit of a gap currently between the guidance that we put out and the education leaders who are quite overwhelmed in a very, very busy education sector. And to try and bridge that gap, we produced an online self-assessment tool called EPIC, that stands for the Education Practice Insights Creator. This was launched in July of 2025, following quite an extensive period of testing with sector leaders, senior leaders from across the education system in England and Wales. So I want to introduce you to that tool today and possibly even give you a very fun and exciting takeaway task. So I'm just going to show you what that online tool looks like. So it's a free online self-assessment tool that will provide you as a user with 37 evidence-informed questions, prompting you to reflect on your practice, to see how aligned you are with what the evidence says works to prevent children from becoming involved in violence. Through testing and through having had over 160 schools complete the tool so far since July, we found that the average completion time is 30 minutes. So we hope that as an education leader, you won't have to spend too much time on it, but we do hope that you will go away and possibly reflect on some of the changes that could be achieved in practice. So if you were to visit the website, it's very easy to register. You simply just need an email, a couple of names and details about your profession, and you would need a unique reference number for your setting. There is an option if you are an unregistered alternative provision provider further along to tick, and you can kind of bypass the need for a unique reference number. So once you have signed up, you will be prompted to complete 37 questions. And they range from across the 5 key recommendations. They will all ask you to kind of score the practice that happens in your education setting, from never happening to always happening. Once you've completed the 37 questions, there is a page to just stress the anonymity of the tool. I just wanted to stress on this call, for anyone interested in completing it, the responses that you give are very much intended to remain anonymous. We think that's a really important part of the tool to ensure that you can answer as honestly as possible and have really honest conversations about the violence prevention practice that's happening in your setting. There are, however, opportunities to share your responses with us as an organisation, which may allow us to just provide you with some tailored support further down the line if we can see there are specific areas of practice that aren't happening in your specific setting or perhaps in your region. That gives us an opportunity as an organisation to help you, either through providing funding, resources, implementation programmes. So there is an opportunity to share your responses with us. There is similarly opportunities to share your responses with a trust, a group, a local authority. That's very much up to you to decide whether or not you'd like to do it. We have worked with a range of big multi-academy trusts in the country so far. And by allowing your responses to be shared with the trust, that trust can kind of get a whole trust picture of what's happening in their settings and perhaps find opportunities to help their staff to develop their skills in specific areas. So once you've completed the 37 questions and the 3 extra questions on anonymity, you're presented with a dashboard that gives you a summary of how aligned you are with the evidence. So in this specific example, you can see that across recommendations 1, 2, 3, perhaps the practice in my setting is quite strong and it's quite aligned with the evidence. But key recommendation number 4 is a particular area that I might need to focus on. There is then a further opportunity to really delve into the detail of that with an insights report, which is available to be downloaded at the top of the page. But within the insights report, there are specific recommendations for all 5 sections. And within these recommendations, there's feedback, there's kind of areas of tangible improvements that you can make. There's links to the guidance report that Dennis has just mentioned. There are, in other areas, links to toolkits that we have on specific interventions. And there are even specific mentions of perhaps who you should be targeting your strategies at if we know that there are children who are disproportionately affected by specific areas, whether it's attendance, violence, opportunities to have a trusted adult in their life. There's similarly an option to compare yourself. We know that perhaps schools enjoy being able to benchmark themselves against other schools, either at a national level, which is available here, perhaps at a regional level. In this specific example, I can kind of benchmark myself with the other schools in London that have completed a self-assessment, or across a range of different metrics. For example, other schools with a similar percentage, free school meals. So we really hope that upon completing this, you'll be able to download your report, you'll be able to share that with your senior leadership team, and perhaps just start having conversations about specific areas of your practice that you could look to improve on and to be more aligned with the evidence. I'm going to pause there. Could I just ask DFE colleagues to bring up the slides again? Great. If we could just go to, I think it's slide 27. That brings me onto just the final part for me, and it's perhaps a takeaway task. I know that there are colleagues on the call who might not be head teachers or setting leaders, and perhaps that's an opportunity to take this task to the head teacher or the senior leader within your education setting. But we would love for senior leaders and education leaders from across the country to take away this task, to reflect on their practice and perhaps complete a self-assessment. We know that there are specific areas of practice that we're starting to see from across the national picture schools need help with. And we would really love to be able to be a part of that system and help you to receive help and to just improve your practice. So the link is there. We will also post the link very shortly in the Q&A function. But I will now pass you back to Nicola for the opportunity to move on to the question and answer session.
Thank you so much, Ben. That is great. Just switched on my camera. And thank you also to all the brilliant speakers we've had so far. We really appreciate your time, and it's really excellent to have your expertise on what is a very complicated but high profile and important subject. So I now have the pleasure of hosting a short Q&A with all the people that you've heard from today. So Dennis, Joe, Matt, Dan and Ben, thank you very much. We will prioritise questions coming in from people, so please do submit your questions in the Q&A function within Teams, and we'll get to as many of those as we can today. So just kicking off with the first question that we've had, and this one I think was pre-submitted. Would it be possible for all safe schools in Southwark, or indeed similar grouping of schools, to use EPIC, and then for the task force to get a school group view? Ben, I wondered if I could turn to you to answer that one.
Definitely. Great question. So the self-assessment is intended to remain anonymous on behalf of the user. However, as I mentioned on that page, there is the opportunity to share your responses with a specific organisation. So if the schools within the Safe Task Force were all happy to complete it, to tick the box to say they'd like to share it with the Southwark Safe Task Force, then that's really easy for us to then share the responses through an Excel function report, and also kind of a summary dashboard that summarizes all of the data. So yes, that's very possible, as long as we have the consent of the schools.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you, Ben. That is super helpful. Moving us rapidly on, how can we ensure a more integrated multi-agency approach to creating teams around the school and surrounding community to aid violence and reduction? Matt and Dan, I wondered if this was one that you might want to take.
I'll try my best, give you my best effort. I think, firstly, one of the things we have in Southwark is a strong head teacher representative group. And so that enables us to, one, share the issues as we see them in our individual schools in a forum, in a setting that is safe, and that we can get a relative idea of how other people are dealing with issues, and or if those issues are indeed occurring in their settings. As a consequence of the strong head teacher group, though, we are able to work very closely and collaboratively with the local authority. So you're not going to local authority with one voice if you're a standalone school, but representing a collective. And as a consequence of that, we tend to get some support and or policy or practice changes locally. I think the big challenge here is making sure that those relationships are high trust, and more specifically that the outcome is, I'll use this term advisedly, pragmatic and realistic, bearing in mind the funding allocations that we have and the challenges that some local authorities are having regarding services. But in short, working collaboratively, we need a strong head teacher group, and so members need to turn up to those meetings, share their issues candidly, and then work collectively with the local authority, sharing those insights that you've gained from those meetings.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Matt. And if you don't mind, I wondered if you could just say a little bit more about the high trust point. That feels really important. I was wondering how easy that was to achieve, and any sort of things that you think have really helped in that space.
So firstly, Southwark Association of Second Head has been going for a very long time, and it's been a pleasure to be chair of it for since 2015, but it was well established beforehand. So just by it being established meant that people go into that meeting knowing that, or into that group knowing that it's a productive group of people that come together, and that based on precedent and previous experiences, we have managed to work collectively together to get really decent outcomes. So one time. Two, secondly, that we created a constitution. It's not very wordy. It's literally on 2 sides of A4 about our expectations, behaviours, and what we're trying to achieve. More specifically, we also say what we are not. So we don't come together to talk around technical things such as detail around teaching and learning. We talk about things that affect all schools and our young people in our community that we think the local authority can help us with. So that's safeguarding, in-year admissions, inclusion, etc. And so being really clear about the parameters of our behaviours and the work that we're doing build that levels of trust. That's not to say we've not had to have conversations where we think that sometimes the level of trust is a little bit below what we would expect, but those conversations take place in good faith and typically get a great response.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt. That was so helpful. A quick question, maybe, Dan, this one's for you actually, that came up during your presentation. What kind of clubs are you running in the morning?
Well, all sorts, but the morning clubs, the 7:30 clubs, are predominantly sports clubs. We're fortunate that our PE staff, we now actually have a running club, 7:30 in the morning, come rain or shine.
Wow.
The PE team, members of the PE team will be out there with the students on their morning run, which is lovely, and it's really well attended. In the morning, we have sports clubs on every morning before school. That is the kind of provision before school. It is sports PE based, but the running club is a real highlight for us.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. Wow, some very brave runners coming up to December. We're lucky today to have a range of people joining the call, and we've got another question. Our next question from a school's liaison police officer: how can police best work within this kind of framework we're talking about here Dennis, I might pass to you first, but then would welcome reflections from our colleagues as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, great question. So I think the most important thing is using those relationships that you've built with the schools that you're connected with. It may be that they're not aware of the resources available at YEF. It may be that they've not completed, for example, their EPIC self-assessment. That's a really great starting point for those schools who are beginning their journey around violence prevention, but also for those schools who are already well on with their journey and may have some great examples of good practice, but still some areas that they could sharpen and improve. So encourage you to share, the resources that we shared after this webinar, and specifically that link to the self-assessment with them. And then once they've undertaken that self-assessment, using that, in collaboration to have those conversations about what are the areas for development and how can you and your team and your colleagues be in support of those things. The recommendation 4, which I mentioned around targeting the times and places where violence occurs, is a classic example, and also relates to the question that was asked earlier on. So if you're aware and have local data around where are the places where children feel most unsafe and most at risk, then a multi-agency approach can be taken to try and find solutions to that. And there's some excellent case studies within our guidance about schools and colleges who have done exactly that, gathered that local data and then put things into practice to improve safety for young people.
Brilliant, thank you, Dennis. Dan, Matt, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
I had a sort of a strategic response, and Dan might have some practical examples of how we manage it during the school week. But as I shared the map of Southwark at the very start, where the violent and robberies took place. So strategically, we work with the police to identify periods of time of the day when the support would be beneficial to us. And we know, I think it was alluded to in the presentation earlier, it's after school in Southwark. It's typically on a Thursday at 5 p.m. In our location that is an issue. So we do have more frequent police patrols in that area. There has been a challenge regarding the preventative work, i.e. police officers coming to school and meeting with groups of students before issues have occurred, or things that Dan and the team have identified as potential things to resolve in peer-to-peer conflict that may escalate and outside the school gate. And we've used the police in the past to do that work, and another voice coming from a crime prevention perspective rather than just the community perspective that we try to deal with. But Dan, I don't know if you've got any practical examples of when issues have arose and that you've contacted the police. I know they're on speed dial to you, so I'll hand off to
that. I'm fortunate enough to have the local schools police team on speed dial. What that does mean is that in the past we've been able to respond really, really quickly before anything more serious has escalated. An example is an issue that's arisen on social media. People there are threats of violence involving many people, some completely unknown to us as a school community, and we were able to involve the Safer Schools police team before anything happened, and that did end up resulting in phones being confiscated. Fortunately, those things happened and nothing more serious happened. And then we were able to support the students who had been victims of those threats sufficiently here in school. And that's just also picking up on one of the questions in the Q&A about having an in-school counsellor. We do have Place to Be in School as a paid counselling service, and we use that where appropriate.
That's really helpful, Dan. Thank you. And we've just had a related question as well in this space about how you involve external organisations and stakeholders when you have issues outside of the school. I realise you've got police contacts on speed dial, but how did you get to the point of being in that place? Have you done reach out to external organisations and stakeholders who know more about what's going on in the community outside of school hours?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is the relationship building. And obviously, I spoke at the beginning, the relationships in the school community that are important, but actually schools are in the centre of the community, but we're not lone rangers. We do have to work with external agencies. And what we set therefore an expectation on external agencies to work with us, not in a way that is kind of defensive or anything like that, but in a way that we're giving you this information, we're sharing this information with you. We need your support in order to best support the young people and the families in the community. And I think actually that goes quite a long way to getting that reciprocal relationship. So it's not a one-way. It's not a one-way relationship, and it's not always things that we can address and resolve on our own. And we share that understanding with the local authority or with other services. And as I mentioned earlier, we do, with regards to attendance, for example, hold other agencies to account as per the DfE guidance, just to the same level of accountability that we hold ourselves to here also at Globe.
Yeah, and just quickly on that strategic level, the head teacher group, we have two representatives that liaise with the local police on a regular basis, meet at least once half a term. It's a bit more frequent at the moment because we've gone through some changes with the police service. And we're able to feed into that at a strategic level, what's going on for schools, and then they come to our meetings and feedback and give us an update about what changes and what needs to happen next. So working at a strategic level with our link principals or head teachers with the police service has helped us gain a greater insight and build relationships.
Brilliant, thank you, Matt. I think we've probably got time for two more questions at the very top. Ben, I might just turn quickly to you to answer the question of, is this tool available for primary and secondary schools or just secondary schools?
Yes, available for all schools in England and Wales, primary, secondary, further education, alternative provision.
Brilliant, that's super helpful. Thank you, Ben. And then on to our final question. How can we support children in years 5 and 6 who are struggling and showing signs of violence? Interested from YEF colleagues whether we're seeing anything in the YEF evidence base, and also welcome reflections from ARC colleagues about anything you're seeing in that space as well. It's obviously the slightly younger years, but coming up to that really important transition point in a child's education journey.
Yeah, certainly. So behaviour management is a key part of our guidance and recommendations around how we keep children in education and avoid the need to get to the point of suspension and exclusion. So within our practice guidance, there is some information about effective behaviour management strategies, but also there's a real specific focus on building young people's social and emotional skills as well, and that ability to be self-aware, to be able to build great relationships, and to be able to understand and manage the emotions that they're experiencing is really crucial at the age that you mentioned there. So yeah, have a look at our education practice guidance, specifically at recommendations 1 and 3, but also want to signpost you to the YAF toolkit, which includes a range of different interventions, all with the focus of reducing the likelihood of children becoming involved in violence. Some of the interventions included in the toolkit also have an impact on behaviour, so it's worth looking out for those as well. You can access that by simply Googling YAF toolkit.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Dennis. I think we've just about timed out now, folks. So I think in closing, it's for me to say thank you again to our wonderful panelists. Your expertise and time is really super appreciated. We've had nearly 250 people join us in this webinar, and I'm sure word will get out that people might be interested to watch this webinar. We're delighted that so many people did find time to attend this webinar. Thank you for doing that. It's great to see so many people from a range of services here who want to be part of this event and hear what we've got to say. So slides from the session today and a feedback form will be shared with you shortly over the next few working days. Small plug before we go, there are 3 more sessions in the series that we'd love to encourage you and any colleagues that you want to tell to attend. So on the 14th of January, we will be focusing on attendance, exclusions and trusted adults. On the 25th of February, social and emotional skills development. And on the 15th of April, violent times and places and unproven approaches. So please do sign up to this. We will include details when we email you with the slides. We'd love to see you all again. In the meantime, please do share this material freely with people, and please have a think about whether now is the time to complete that EPIC self-assessment tool. So thank you once again, everybody. Wishing everybody a lovely and I hope warm evening. And thanks once again for being with us. Bye, folks.